Hello, everyone. Welcome to a webinar hosted by the Object Management Group in Tech, titled Using BPMN, CMMN, and DMN Together, a deeper look at process modeling's triple crown of standards. Thank you for attending. And sorry as I play with this first slide. There we go. This is our second webinar on this topic. You could find part one in OMG's Bright Talk channel if you would like to view. And thank you for everyone who's joining us again for part two. My name is Tracy Berardi. I'm Senior Marketing Manager with the OMG, and I'll be moderating the presentation. I'm joined by my colleagues Claude Boudoir, owner and principal of Sebe IT and Knowledge Management and Energy Domain Consultant to the OMG, as well as Denis Gagne, CEO and CTO of Tech and chair of the BPMN Interchange Working Group here at the OMG. We'll start by telling you a bit about the OMG and our work. The OMG is an international open membership, not-for-profit technology standards consortium founded in 1989. We develop technology standards that provide real-world value for vertical markets, everything from automotive, business, finance, healthcare, to insurance, security, and the industrial Internet of Things. As you can see on the slide, the OMG is focused on middleware platforms, modeling platforms, systems assurance, and vertical domain specifications. All of the standards are freely available on OMG's website, and we have a strong relationship with ISO, and many OMG standards also become ISO standards through this process. Membership. The OMG brings together its international membership to develop and revise standards as technologies change over the years. On this slide, there's a snapshot of participating organizations, and we'd like to encourage everyone on the call today to consider joining the OMG or signing up for email updates if you're interested in helping to write or track the progress of these IT standards. You're very welcome to do so. We have some attachments. It's in the Bright Talk presenter screen if you'd like to download some materials, including a PDF version of today's presentation. And we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you'd like to submit questions, you can do so through the Questions tab. And with this brief introduction, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Claude, who will talk about the BPMI working group at the OMG. Oh, here we go. Which created the modeling standards we're talking about today.
Thank you, Tracy, for this introduction. And I guess the slide, thank you for getting back to the right slide. Hello, everyone. I'm Claude Boudoir. Tracy introduced me. Thank you for being here. When the OMG moved in after a very few years of its existence from covering only technology aspects to also having a second focus on vertical domains and the business, one of the task forces that was created was focused on the modeling of business concepts and how that would facilitate integration of enterprise systems in particular through standards in this domain. And so out of the multiple task forces in which the Object Management Group is organized, we have one called BMI, or Business Modeling and Integration Domain Task Force. And like the other task forces, the way we work is a very open process where when we've determined out of our roadmap work that there is an opportunity or a desire to standardize a certain type of modeling or a certain type of interfacing that allows integration, we issue a request for proposals, and we let any members of the OMG, as well as other associated people, come forward and propose specifications for a new or an updated standard, and then we have a process of review and approval and sometimes merging of multiple proposals that results in the final standard. And there are several additional levels of approval so that the entire OMG community gets to voice its input And the OMG Architecture Board ensures the consistency of all the specifications, and the OMG Board of Directors ensures their commercial viability. So through this work, there's quite a number of standards that have been adopted over the years. There's one, the business motivation model allows you to model strategy, tactic, goals, objectives, and related concepts. There is a language to describe the semantics of business vocabulary and business rules, in other words, to transform informal specifications into formal ones. Then there's the three notations that Denis is going to talk to us much more about today, and that we were also describing at a first level in the previous webinar, which we did in April. BPMN for business processes, CMMN for case models, and DMN for decision models. And more recently, I think it was adopted last year or 2 years ago, the Value Delivery Modeling Language, VDML, allows the modeling of value propositions and value exchange. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we also had a significant effort to define what we call the date and time vocabulary to introduce formality in the description of time and time intervals in the specifications of business systems. So that's what the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force is focused on right now. So I'm going to hand over the baton to Denis Gagné, who has some very interesting slides, and you'll see the richness of what he presents through the live aspect of his demonstrations. So, Denis, it's over to you.
Merci, Claude, and welcome everybody to this presentation on BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. So, for a matter of context, let me start by talking about the digital revolution that we are living through right now. And this digital revolution is fueled by rapid technology adoption, very changing customer behavior, and increasing competition in this global market. So within this digital revolution, we're living through a paradigm shift that no organization can really escape and has to address it in some form or another. Now, while we're living through this transformation, the digital transformation brought about by this revolution, we have to make sure not to confuse doing a digital transformation of your organization with the increased spending of technology. Yes, we are adopting more and new technology like mobile, cloud, social, or big data, or even semantic technology, or machine learning that we're hearing more and more today. But as we do so, we have to remain focused on maintaining the main goals for the organization, which is to keep this process centricity, the customer centricity, innovation centricity, and knowledge centricity. And this is what will assure our success in living through this transformation. So our goal as an organization is really to figure out simpler, more agile, smarter processes that we can use to address the changing behavior of our customers, and while bringing efficiency in how we get things done. Through the years, we've seen an evolution on how we create new applications and how we interact with our customer. With legacy system having a monolithic type of architecture, nowadays we're looking at extracting data, process, and rules right out of these models. So as we're tackling modeling, we have to make sure that we model in context, that we model with a purpose, and that we make use of standards. So modeling with a context is really about the architecture, the reuse scope, and operational strategy that we're using. Modeling with a purpose is about having the right model for the right goal in order to provide the right answer to the right question. And the use of standards helps us greatly by ensuring universality of the models we create to make sure they're interchangeable and that we have portability of the skill and the people that work to create these models or to read them and consume them after. So when I'm talking about modeling in context, I'm really talking about looking at different aspects that models how, that affects how you will model, basically. So from an architectural point of view, you may be in a situation where you have a predefined architecture and you have to model to align to this architecture. Or you may be in an emerging architecture situation where these models are progressively defining what the architecture should be. From a reuse point of view, we may be in a complete greenfield modeling situation where there's not much assets already existing, or we may be in a situation where there's a lot of assets already existing that we want to reuse in our modeling effort. From a scope point of view, we may be just modeling for a specific project, or we may be modeling in the large and modeling for the total organization or enterprise. And from an operational point of view, we may be modeling to standardize the way we do things, or we may be modeling for integrating the way things get done. So all these different elements come and influence the way you will model and which strategy to model you will have to use or you'll choose to use. When talking about modeling with a purpose, what I'm looking at is whether you're modeling for a diagramming purpose or for really creating a deep model. So whether you're looking for a uniform interpretation, so we want to communicate, we're using modeling as a communication device, or whether we're using modeling as a specification device and to obtain a unique behavior from people and systems. And as you do so, if your goal is to be visualizing how things get done, then you may want to be more descriptive or more informative about the way you capture your model. So your model will be more about picking up the information and making sure you have a clear communication. If you're modeling with the goal of structuring and analyzing, then you may be more interested in being more descriptive with your model to make sure that you have enough elements to support this deeper analysis. And finally, if you're modeling with the goal of enacting or automating and controlling or structuring the way things get done, then you may want to be more prescriptive. So as you build your model, there's different variants of your context and your purpose that will affect the way you model, the level of abstraction at which you will model, and the level of details you will need in your different models. So those are all things that you have to keep in consideration. So today we want to talk about 3 core management practices that we will explore through standards that the OMG has provided, and namely process management, case management, and decision management. And process management is really a discipline to help us as an organization to become more efficient. And within process management, the OMG has provided a standard that is called BPMN, the Business Process Model and Notation. In case management, we're doing a paradigm shift to support the work of the knowledge worker, and OMG has produced a standard there that is called CMMN for Case Management Model and Notation. And in decision management, we're looking to increase the organization agility by specifying the requirement on how decisions are made and also specifying the logic by which we achieve those decisions. And OMG has a standard there called DMN for Decision Model and Notation. And the value proposition of these 3 standards together is really to reach faster agreement on the as-is and the to-be process, to encourage the different stakeholder participation. Whoop, this is changing on me, excuse me. To facilitate the analysis and improvement of operation, and to create a library of process, case, or decision so that you can onboard new clients, partners, or clients. Oh, this is skipping ahead on me. So in the last presentation, we explored a little bit about the basics elements of BPMN, CMMN, and DMN. Just a quick recap here. When we're looking at BPMN, we're really interested in the core concept of processes and more specifically activities within processes. When we're looking at CMMN, we're looking at different business events that happens in the context of a case. And when we're looking at DMN, we're looking at the different rules that affect the decision we make. In terms of focus, BPMN is focused on looking at the transition of the efforts from activity to activity and how the data affect these transitions, while in CMMN, we're looking at managing a context. And by having data in context, we have basically information. And in DMN, we're looking at applying those rules into this context. So now we have information that is applied, which provides us with knowledge. From a procedural and semantical point of view, BPMN has a procedural semantic that is based on the token semantic, and we'll explore this together in the next few minutes. While CMMN has a declarative approach where we state what is possible, and it uses an event condition action semantic. And in the case of DMN, we have a more functional approach, and where we use a first order logic to provide us the semantic, the deeper semantic of the two. So let me switch now to an example in BPMN. So here I have a BPMN model, and this BPMN model at the bottom here I have my process activities, and I'm showing a collaboration with a certain participant here that is depicted with a pool. So in BPMN, we can depict a participant as a pool, and we can have a process that interacts between different participants. And BPMN has three core elements, or four core elements within it. The first one is events that are circles. So here I have a start event. Here I have an intermediate event, that is an event that happens in the course of the process, and I have end events. So the circles are telling me that these are all events. The rounded rectangles are activities, and those are the work where the work actually takes place. And the diamond shapes are gateways which are used to branch the effort. So in BPMN, the semantic is that of a token semantic. So it's the idea of following a token. So here, my participant sends me a message. As soon as I receive the message, I move into a first task where work can be accomplished. As soon as the work is accomplished, I'm in a waiting mode for another message, which is the intermediate event. When I receive this message, I can move on to another task. Here, I have a marker that specifies that this is a decision task. Once that decision is completed, then I can choose, and this is an exclusive choice, so I can choose either to go to the case task or the service task. If I opt for the service task, then I can complete this activity, and then when I reach the end, my dark envelope here is telling me that this is a sending message back to my participant. So you can see that in BPMN, we're really walking through the process, taking different paths. So for example, I could have taken the alternative path here that I have and walked through the same kind of activity, but here at this point, choose my case task and move into that path rather than the other path. Now, I may at some point realize that this is not really the behavior that I wanted, and I may come and change this gateway for a parallel gateway, in which case now you will see that my process will have the same structure. So it's exactly the same structure. I'm waiting for the message to come in. I have a decision. But what's different here is now my gateway is telling me that both these two tasks, the case task and the service task, can be done in parallel and completed, both of them. So with different markers in BPMN, we can specify different behaviors. And as you add more and more markers, you can specify more and more different behaviors that you may want to obtain from your BPMN. So that's a quick introduction to BPMN and its global semantic. Now, when we move to CMMN, one of the core differences with CMMN is not only does CMMN take a declarative approach, so that is that rather than prescribing how things happen in a sequence like we just saw in BPMN, in CMMN we define a context and we define how we react to the different events, whether they're user events, time events, or whether they are document type of events with new document arriving, within the context. But one further distinction also of CMMN to BPMN is that while in BPMN we do the model and then we execute the model, and it's the same pattern that is design at design time that is executed at execution time, where in CMMN we separate the design and the execution time or runtime phase in two separate phases, where it's possible to define a model at design time and at runtime to modify the model on the fly. So we can add new activities, we can add new things to be done at runtime within CMMN, which is not really possible within BPMN. So that's another major distinction to CMMN here. So let me do the same with CMMN here and give you a quick sense of how CMMN is different from its execution semantic. So here I have a CMMN model, and my case plan model here is giving me the context. So this case plan, this folder shape is giving me the context in which I am. And in there, I'm listening for different events to happen. So you can see here that many different things can happen in this context. So here in this model, I have this event condition construct that I was talking about. So this says, on this timer event, and the little diamond says the if part. So if the condition is met, then do the action. Now, CMMN is quite expressive. I can also have only the condition. So I can say, if this condition is met, do the action. Or I can have no on part or if part and only do the activity directly. So these are the three patterns of ECA we can do in CMMN. So we can do event, condition, action, or just the action directly. Plus in CMMN, we have the notion of discretionary tasks. Those are the dashed line. And the discretionary tasks are tasks that can be added by the user at runtime at their discretion based on certain scaffolding that may be defined in there. So now when I'm looking at this context, I can see that there's many different things that can be happening at any time. For example, here it says, if I get a user request to close the case, then the case is closed. And so my old case is completed. That's all that happened. Now, another potential thing may be that a certain time is met, and then if my condition that I put on there is met, then this task can take place, and I can complete the task. And this task, with the exclamation mark there, makes it a required task. So it means that this task must absolutely be done for this case to complete. So now that it's done, I can complete the case. So you can see that I have a very different trace. And you can go on like this with different pattern of usage. For example, once this condition on this task here is met, then I can repeat this task. So this allows me, every time this condition is met, to repeat this task. The little symbol here means that it's a repeatable task that I can repeat every time this condition is met. And then if this event happens, I can actually do this task, complete this task, and now I can close the case. So you may have noticed that basically in CMMN, everything is optional unless it's marked as mandatory. That is that the case can be closed as soon as anything that is mandatory that is done. So here, as soon as this task that is mandatory is done, I can close the case. I can carry on if I want, but I couldn't close the case if that wasn't the case. So even if I repeat this task here, I still cannot close the case. But then comes in play the discretionary task. So while I'm in this context, the planning table here tells me that I have discretionary task in this context, which is this one. I can choose to add it to my board. And as I do so, it completes automatically because it has no manual or blocking situation. So then I can create different situations. So in CMMN, we have the notion of a milestone. So if the condition on this milestone is met, and here I've expressed an end, so and that this case file item is created, then I can complete the case. So this provides us with a very dynamic and agile way to address events that are happening within a context. Now, another construct that I have here is this construct of a blocking user task. So this is not completing because it's blocking. And while I'm in this context, so the planning table here is telling me that while I'm in the context of this task, at any time during runtime, the user can add any of these discretionary tasks, whether it's a manual non-blocking task, or I could also ask this process task, and then I would have to complete this process task. And then when I complete this, then the discretionary availability is gone because I'm out of this context. So the same is true. And here I have a manually activated task. So this task will not start unless I manually activate it. And once I manually activate it, it takes place. So there's all different kinds of patterns, and there's many more that can be expressed. Just like in BPMN, the different markers are giving you more about the expressiveness of the behavior, and you're drawing your thing. As you've noticed, there's no sequence in here. I can imply a sequence by chaining some tasks, but at the core, CMMN is declarative and doesn't really involve any sequencing. Now, let me do the same with DMN. So in DMN, we have the decision model and notation, and the DMN notation has some very simple building block. So let me switch to my screen share. So in DMN, we have decision, which are those rectangle-shaped notation here. We have inputs that are those oval type of shape. So this is saying that decision A requires, as an information requirement, of these two inputs in order to achieve the decision. And here it's saying that decision B requires the results of decision A plus the input 3 as an input in order to make decision B. Plus here, for decision B, we're saying that this decision B is really dependent on an authority, which is some knowledge source. So this could be a standing operating procedure, it could be some rules, could be some government regulation, that is the authority under which this decision is made. So with a DRD, which we call a decision requirement diagram, we can specify different decisions and the requirement to make those decisions in terms of information requirement, in terms of knowledge requirement or authority requirement to achieve the decision. Now in DMN, we can further go deeper and we can actually specify the decision logic. So one way of specifying the decision logic in DMN is to use a decision table. So decision table is a simple notation to specify the different rules that affect a decision. So in this case here, for my decision A, I have a unique hit policy. That means that only one of the rules, I'm interested in the result of only one of the rules. And it says if my input 1 is true, my input 2 is true, then my output is true. And then I have another rule, so my rows are rules here, that says, well, but if my input 1 is true and my input 2 is false, then the answer is true. So very similarly, you can specify the logic and you can walk through the behavior of the decision. So as soon as I have my two input 1 and input 2, I can walk through this decision and say that input 1 is false, input 2 is true, run through this decision. It will tell me the answer is true. And if I go to the decision table, I can see which rule fire to give me that answer. It's rule 3 in this particular case. And then I can walk through, but in DMN, you don't have to necessarily specify the decision logic. Like for example here, for decision B, I didn't specify how the logic comes about. I just know that there's a decision B that requires the input from decision A and input 3, and I can then complete this decision and then have a full decision hierarchy accomplished in here. So that's BPMN, CMMN, and DMN in terms of their behaviors and how we can go about through them. Let me switch back to my slide. So now what I'd like to talk to you about, and that was requested during the last webinar we did, is to have a more worked out example. So I've given you the basic core semantic and behavior of these models, and now I'll take you through a more worked out example of BPMN, CMMN used together to model the operations of an organization. So what I'm sharing with you right now is a BPMN model. And in this BPMN model, I'm describing the customer support process. So basically, I have different participants that are represented by these pools here. So I have my customer, I have my customer support, I have the second level support group, and I have the supplier. And here I'm describing the interaction that happens between all these different participants to achieve my customer support. So as we read this here, we can see that we have an event. So if I walk through this, as soon as the customer reach out to our customer support, then there's a first task to get the issue description. So this is a user task in BPMN. Getting the user description, then a decision is made of whether to escalate, solve the issue, or to, this may be a roadside. So I'm in the context of a car rental company here, EU Rent, and my car rental company, my customer support is centralized. So the person gets the issue description, and maybe it's a situation where they cannot really solve the problem, so they will escalate the problem. So this gets sent to a sub-process to escalate the issue. So my sub-process here is waiting to complete for its content to be completed. So the first task I do, I inform back the customer that I'm escalating his issue. Then I escalate the issue to my second level. While this is happening, I'm waiting for the results. So let's assume that the first level resolved the issue. They provide me with the answer, and then their role is completed. Once I get the answer, I can provide it to the end user, the customer, and if he's satisfied with it, I can complete this particular instance of the process. Now, there's many different variations, as you can see, that can happen with this process. For example, it could be that this was just an administrative issue and that I can go right away and provide the solution to the client, and if the client is satisfied, complete the process. Now, alternatively, it could be a situation where when I get the description of the issue, the client is actually stuck on the side of the road, so I need to start a roadside assistance. So in this situation, I will use a case. Given that a roadside assistance is very unpredictable, it's hard for me to prescribe what could happen. We don't really know what's going on. So we're going to send somebody on location, and I'm going to connect to the case. So now I'm going to move into the case description. So here's my CMMN model of the roadside assistance. As you can see, there's many different things that can happen. At any time, if my client requests to dismiss this case, I can dismiss it. You can see here that there's a portion where we will evaluate as the support truck gets on the roadside, it can make an assessment. At any time here, you can see I have a discretionary stage, which is to make a car replacement. So at any time, at the discretion of the person in the support, they can decide to replace the case, so the car. So that's this here. And this is the stage that handles a different type of various repair. And then I have a milestone here of car repair and car replace. So here, this is what it's saying. So at any time, if I reach the milestone car repaired and I have a report, I can close this case. So for example, you see if this is what's happening, then I can do this. So let's assume that the truck reached the car and the person in trouble. So the first thing is he gets the issue report that came from customer support. When he gets there, he makes an assessment of the car. Now, I have a task here to determine the repair location, which is defined as a rule, a corporate rule. So as soon as the report comes in, I can drop right into the decision. And the decision about repairing the repair location is based on depending on what kind of issue it is and whether to send it to the shop. So if I run this, then I can say, well, this is really just a flat tire, and I don't think we should send it to the shop for repair. So now the person that is there, our employee that is there to assist the person in distress can run this, and we'll get the result that, yes, you can repair it on the road, and we can go and see the decision logic that brings that apart, and it basically says, well, if it's something that you can do on the road and you say it can be done on the road, do it. But you can see that different behavior could have been happening here. So for example, if I go back here and I complete this task, now I'm repairing on the road. So here I now have my car location repair that was established. My condition that it's repaired on the road is completed. So now this was about changing a tire, and I can change the tire, at which point I complete this stage, at which point I complete this other stage, which gives me the car repaired situation. Now, as soon as the collision report or the event report comes in, it could be at any time, that triggers a decision that is managed by a rule on how we will split the damage or the cost of the repair. So as soon as I get there, I can now, and this decision of the responsibility is based on the damage type and the membership level. So let's say this is a silver member, and it's the driver that was responsible for this, and it was a tire problem. If I run this decision, it tells me that EU rent will pay 20% and the renter will pay 80%. And I can go and look at the decision logic behind it, and is expressed in this table. Because it was a silver driver member, and the driver was responsible, and it's tire or glass situation, this is how we split it. But you can see with the first rule that if this would have been a gold member, we don't really care who's responsible. We don't care what kind of damage type it is. We will pay, EU rent will pay 100% of the fees. So the rules here are telling us, depending on your membership level, the responsibility, and the damage type, we will have a different split of the cost. So now that this is established and I have my report, I can now complete my stage, and you can see I have a trace of events and action that have taken place. And now that my case is complete, I can come back and complete this particular instance of my process and how I dealt with this customer support situation. So now you can see much deeper modeling in BPMN, in CMMN, and in DMN, showing you the different types of variation we can do in doing that. So some of the best practice that we have in using BPMN, CMMN, and DMN together are the following. So if you're modeling using BPMN and you find yourself writing a lot of gateway in a chain or chaining different gateways together, then this is probably a situation where you're trying to model decision logic using BPMN. And it is recommended that you take that chunk of your BPMN model and use a DMN or a decision task that you will model using the DMN notation. If you're in BPMN and you find yourself in a situation where you have a lot of intermediate events interlacing into one another, or you have a lot of boundary intermediate events that you have to put on different tasks saying, well, if that happened, or if this happened, or if that happened, do that, then this is a sign that you probably should be cutting out this chunk of your BPMN model and using CMMN to define it as a case where you can be in a better situation to define the context in which these events can be addressed in a more agile and adaptable way. Similarly, if you're in BPMN and you find yourself that you have to use what we call an ad hoc sub-process, which is a type of way in BPMN to define a situation where you don't really know the sequence, then that's a clear sign that you should use a case and use the CMMN notation to capture this logic, where you will be able to capture the reaction to the different business and document event for this. And conversely, if you're in CMMN and you find yourself making a lot of interdependency between tasks, saying, on completion of this task, if this condition is met, then do this task. On completion of this task, then do this task. Then it's a clear sign that you're prescribing a task chaining, and then BPMN is a better representation for this chunk of your CMMN, and you should cut up this chunk of your CMMN model and encapsulate it into a process task in CMMN and define this process task using BPMN. So this gives you some of the best practices in modeling. I will now turn it back to Claude because we want to leave a lot of discussion time and questions. I don't want to walk through too many different scenarios. I'll let people guide us with their question and go back to the worked out example to be more specific. So we're going to leave a lot of time for questions. So I'll pass it back to Claude for a summary of the presentation.
Thank you, Denis. That was very good. In particular, I think the ability to see the live demo was really interesting, and actually that's already triggered a question that we will come to in a moment. I just want to wrap up here with the plan that OMG has, the Object Management Group, to continue to evolve this standard as well as other standards that are within the mission of the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force. These specifications are continuously evolving. We're not trying to make it difficult for people to follow the technology by changing the technology all the time. But the users of these modeling notations and of the tools, and the companies that market these tools, companies like Denis' own Trisotech, but also other companies in this market, and when it comes to BMN, there's something like 15 or 20 companies supplying BPMN tools, for instance. They constantly bring us back feedback about ambiguities they may have noticed in the notation, improvements that could be made to the symbols or to the way they're connected, etc. So periodically, as part of our work, we create additional versions or refinements or clarifications, and that work goes on periodically. So Denis was very busy last year and evolving CMMN, creating version 1.1, and it came out recently. We are looking at, we started discussing it at our last meeting, and I expect it to become an item on our work plan. As co-chair of BMI myself, I certainly will see to that we need to update BPMN in order to allow the same thing that was introduced in CMMN 1.1, where CMMN is no longer in its own little bubble isolated from the rest, but CMMN 1.1 allows call-outs, if you want, to BPMN models and DMN decisions. And so we probably need to do the same thing to BPMN and clarify, for instance, the relationship between what is an ad hoc process in BPMN and what is a case, and allow a BPMN subtask to invoke a CMMN case, and perhaps also link a diamond in BPMN to a DMN model more explicitly. We have other things that the Business Modeling and Integration Task Force intends to do. There's one thing that's already going on is that we're working with some other groups to try to create a common business architecture meta model. And the first version of it is going to be focused on the notion of business capability and the capability map as a business architecture artifact. And then there has been some work done by another OMG task force on risk and threat modeling, limited to operational risk with a particular focus on cyber threats. And we are planning to extend this after that first model is published to cover business risks, financial risks, reputation risk, legal risks, etc., and allow people to formalize the models of risk and risk mitigation, probability, impact, etc., that are fundamental to running a business. So the conclusion of this summary is, first of all, there are 3 standards there. They are well implemented. There's tools to use them. They have well-defined documentation, semantics, groups of users, etc. So use these notations in your work as you see fit. Their graphical aspect is something that makes it a key element in having a dialogue between IT people and business people in particular. Those diagrams are at least one of the goal, and I think you saw that through the demo, can be understood by a business person, but they provide the people who might implement a system to support the business with the formality needed to create the requirements. Participate in the work if you can. Become a member of the OMG and participate in the work, or at least has to be added to the mailing lists. You can you can basically contact Tracy Berardi, who introduced this webinar. You have her email address down there. It's very simple, tracy@omg.org, and you can ask her for a guest pass to one of our meetings, or to be added to the distribution list for the BMI task force. The OMG website has a list of the upcoming meetings. Our next meeting will be on September 12 in Chicago, and the following one, December 5 in San Diego. So we really invite everyone to join and help with the work. As I said, this is an open process, and the involvement of the end users is absolutely fundamental. This is not something that we do in a closed room between technologists without listening to the people we aim to serve. So with that, here's the last slide with the URLs, and we're going to switch to questions. And I'm going to ask Tracy to moderate the Q&A period.
Perfect. Thanks, Claude and Denis. First question, what is a case task? Is it equivalent to an ad hoc sub-process?
No. So, no, a case task is a case task is not equivalent to a ad hoc sub-process. But what you have is an ad hoc sub-process in BPMN can be better defined using a case model. So not just a simple case task, but a complete CMMN model can provide you this environment. An ad hoc sub-process in BPMN is a context, is a container or a context in which the activities can happen in different sequence and can happen under different conditions. So we suggest that using the CMMN notation for that portion of your work is a better way to capture these different situations that may evolve.
Thanks, Denis. And what simulation tool are you using during the presentation?
This particular tool is a tool from Trizatec. It's called the Communicator, and it's a tool that does the animation of the different values. So we looked at the BPMN, the CMMN, and the DMN, what we call the animator of these tools.
Thank you. Next question. Hello, Denis. I dived a bit more into CMMN recently, and I wonder the whole time, what is the reason that a new notation for case management was created that partially resembles BPMN, and could it have been simply integrated into BPMN? As advantages, I see that business needs to learn only one notation, and the organization doesn't need to buy and get used to a new tool. Personally, I'm doing all my case management modeling in BPMN. Thanks in advance.
So the idea is that the three notations are complementary, and as you can see, there's a lot of similar concepts that are reused. So it's a separation of concern, really. So it's to allow people that only want to do a prescriptive process definition to use the notation and not have to bother with learning the decision management aspect of it or the case management aspect, and vice versa. But argumentatively, we are working at OMG of making those three notations work very well together. Hopefully we showed you some example of that today and allow you to do. Now, if you're doing your case management modeling in CMMN, I can just imagine some of the headaches you're having in situation where it's impossible to prescribe the sequence of things. And that's where CMMN become much more efficient and more expeditive and more expressive at describing those situations. But yes, it is always possible to do decision modeling in BPMN. It's arduous and not very nice to look at, but it's possible. But DMN is more efficient. So each of these notations take a separation of concern approach, bring value and effectiveness of efficiency in documenting and expressing things, and they can be all joined together as we demonstrated today.
Thank you. And could you point us to papers or other publications which describe all three modeling approaches together?
Well, on the attachment of this webinar, you will find different papers and elements that will point you in the right direction. There's OMG material there that will talk about all three standards together. And admittedly, the existence of all three standards and working together is quite new. CMMN and DMN are fairly newcomers to the BMI group and to the capability of modeling. We're seeing more and more tools that are integrated in all three of them. There's even tools that execute all three of them if execution is your goal. So the reference material is more separate than integrated. So you will find a lot on BPMN, a lot on CMMN, a lot on DMN, but not too many elements exist documenting all three together. Hopefully this is something that will change in the year to come as more and more vendors and practitioners are interested in using all three together.
Yeah, Denis, we did discuss in some of our roadmap meetings that better education to the users about how to integrate the various notations and models that we've defined would be an interesting to do. Like everything else, we're limited by resources, obviously, so we'd certainly love to have some help. You sort of are our thought leader on this, but you can't do everything in the 24 hours in a day. But we do hope to provide better, not really training material, but I would say education material to answer exactly this question. This has come up before, but that was a great question.
Yes, and certainly these webinars are a first attempt at us providing more information on how you can use all three together.
Right. And Denis or Claude, do you have any thoughts or recommendations on using Archimate with these modeling notations?
Claude, do you want to take this?
The question of using Archimate is something that comes up consistently. Archimate is really, in my opinion, at a bit of a higher level than this. Archimate really helps you connect the various levels of from high-level business architecture down all the way to system architecture and infrastructure models. So the focus of Archimate is the the traceability between what are your strategies, your capabilities, your processes, your systems, and the infrastructure that support that. I wouldn't think, although I'm not, I'm not a member of the open group, and so I don't necessarily know as much about Archimate as some other people I know. But I wouldn't think that you would use Archimate to go down into the detailed specification of a process, of a case, or of a decision. What you would have in an Archimate model is it would say at some point you have a certain process. That process is there to support a certain business capability, and it is supported and implemented in certain applications. And Archimate would sort of, I think, leave you a choice of how you're going to do the detailed modeling of that process or that case. And at that point, you would switch to BPMN as opposed to staying in Archimate. And I realize that this is an answer that makes some people cringe because it means that you're using multiple languages in combination and potentially that you use multiple tools. We don't control at OMG the evolution of Archimate. Obviously, it's a product of the open group. We are trying right now to do some work to allow basically a UML profile for Archimate so that you could use UML tools to do Archimate models, and that's the extent to which we're getting involved in this, and this profile may clarify things a little bit.
Great. Next question, we can probably take maybe two more, I'd say, and we have plenty coming in, so perhaps afterwards we can respond separately. So for DMN and CMMN, have you defined completely the semantic and persistence model to enable software vendors to build tools based on those languages, or is there some work pending for this to occur?
No, so the answer is yes, it's been defined. So all three, BPMN, CMMN, and DMN, are at the same level in the sense that the standard describes the notation and the meaning of these notation, but also describe a meta model to provide the composition and structure of these models, and also specify interchange file format, and also provide an execution semantic. So all three standards have the full description. All three standards are implementable in engines, and as I mentioned, there's already an engine that exists that execute BPMN, engine that exists that executes CMMN, an engine that exists that executes DMN. We're going to see more and more, and we already have some engines that execute all three of them in an integrated fashion. So yes, the answer is yes, DMN and CMMN are following suit on BPMN for that matter.
Mm-hmm. The OMG Business Modeling and Integration Work Task Force, you mentioned new participants getting involved. Can you describe what you're looking for, some of the help that you would need if folks wanted to join the group?
Well, we're basically looking for thinking and breathing bodies who can help with the work we're doing. So that's a flip answer. But the way we work primarily is that we have a quarterly meeting face-to-face, but we also have a mailing list, and we can generate any number of conference calls to advance the work, and of course email exchanges. And there's several other questions in the queue that are also related to this. There's someone who says, I have an idea about how to model risk in BPMN, so we have a tentative roadmap, but it is some with the things we're going to want to do, like adding to BPMN some of the callouts to other notations or modeling risk, etc. The people who come to the meetings are really the ones who influence the work, and then they can go back home with an assignment to do some of the work and propose it to the other members via email, and whatever collaboration tool they want. It's a very cooperative, very open process. Everyone can come to the table, bring their ideas, help review the work of others. So there's really no limitation to what your creativity and your time can achieve. I would say the first thing to do is to ask us to send a message to Tracy so that you can be put on the mailing list of the task force. It's not a huge amount of messages, but it'll keep you posted on what we're planning. And then if you have the ability to travel to one of our meetings, looking at the OMG calendar, that is the best way to get introduced to people, network during the breaks, etc. Bring your ideas to the table and start participating in the work. That would be my recommendation on how to get involved.
Perfect. Thank you, Claude, and thank you, Denis, and for everyone joining us today. Right after the presentation ends, it is archived and available on demand. The same URL that you received in an email to join today. If you click on that link again, you can view the recorded version. And it's on OMG's Bright Talk channel. There you'll also find part 1 of this webinar series that we presented in May, if you're interested in some more information. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.